trigger happy and I give less than a fuck. Love me or hate me, I'ma show enough, rip shit up. It's Mr. Nothing, nice on a mic stand. Mic in the left and the zest in my right hand. I took a puff, had enough now, hold up. If that was Indo, niggas getting rolled up.
What's going on, folks? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the most recent and pretty much final Linkin Park album, One More Light. Now, this came out in spring of 2017, very shortly before Chester Bennington passed away. And this is like the last true burst of like the Linkin Park sound that would happen. And I feel like I'm going to cover everything by Linkin Park. I don't have many records left to review, but this album, I did a couple of reactions when these songs first came out. I remember doing Heavy and Battle Symphony, but then I did not review this album in 2017 or any year after. So I wanted to cover this project just to kind of see how it stands up and see what it does to Linkin Park's legacy and that type of stuff, because it was different. I mean, that's definitely the thing about it. Linkin Park's One More Light was different just because it definitely wasn't new metal, it wasn't alternative metal, and it wasn't heavy metal. They kind of aimed for like a new direction here that would have been vastly interesting to see what would have happened if there had been a few more records. I guarantee that there probably would have been a couple more Linkin Park records by now if what happened had not happened. And it just leaves everyone with kind of like a question mark as far as the direction that this band was planning on going from 2017 forward. Just listening to the single Heavy, which actually was on the radio and had some popularity to it, but I think there were some people that didn't like the changes and that kind of pissed the band off. But I kind of feel like it's an interesting angle, because basically what this album is just pop and electronica Linkin Park. And they had already went in the electronica direction and EDM direction with Recharged from 2013. But this album just primarily focuses on that, just loses some of the rock instruments like guitars and stuff, and goes for more of like a neo-soul kind of pop type vibe also. And that's all this album is. Now, to kind of say the one thing about it that I would have to say is just the fact that it's very much a depressed and morbidly depressed record. Like, if you remember songs by Linkin Park, like Breaking the Habit, Numb, what's that song? Crawling, and there's one other one, In the End. Like, some of those records that you heard from Linkin Park where Chester was kind of slightly kind of moody and kind of had like it looked like he had a lot of bloodletting and some stuff that he wanted to get off his chest. That takes full front on this album. This is like one of the most emo pop albums I've seen in a while, and I really wish we could have seen more of the direction that this could have went. I mean, but this is complete emo pop, and like the depression and the thoughts of suicide prevention and some of these type of situations that just have a complete pitch and like tunnel vision on the concept of depression, sorrow, and just overall bad emotions that they alluded to throughout their other albums. But this is kind of where it takes center stage this time. A lot of this there's hardly any song on this album that has any sort of kind of regular expression. Like, they don't really make any regular songs that don't fit the theme. Like, if you're looking for something like One Step Closer or some record like that does not have the central mood and theme of this album, you're not going to find that. Most of this is about either overcoming some bad thing or the fact that you don't. And that's just kind of the concept, is just the brooding, the bloodletting, and the overall pitch of just not being in a good headspace kind of takes very much prevalence on this record. And it makes sense, because I don't know if Chester wanted to not be here just off a whim after the couple months, but it seems like this was a cloud in his head for quite some time in the result of this project, because there's just really nothing that has any sort of superfluous pep to it or anything that kind of sees like they were having good times. Most of this is pretty much in a storm cloud over your head kind of mood the whole way through. I mean, there's some songs that try to indicate that I'm going to fight and I'm going to try to get better, but for the most part it has like a generally storm cloud and kind of depressed and mostly kind of just like somber kind of impression towards it. But all right, so we'll talk about the singles. The first single is Heavy, and I talked about this song in the past. I don't remember what I thought of it, but this is a pretty accurate blue collar song. I mean, this is like what I said, where this is kind of emo pop. It doesn't have anything to do with rock, but this is just kind of emo R&B pop type record. And I really like the production on here. Chester Bennington should have had a longer first verse, and I feel like the Kiera chick suited them well. I haven't heard of her prior to this song, but I just wonder how that kind of went. But yeah, it's a very like lightning ready kind of pop. It's a very lightning ready pop song that's made. I think I do remember hearing this song on the radio like 5 6 years ago and stuff. I kind of want to say that that was the concept there, and it's pretty charming. I mean, I definitely feel like it's very somber, and I could hear this in the club. But this is kind of like one of the songs that you would hear if you heard it in a movie where the hero's kind of trying to get back up and he lost the girl and that type stuff. It doesn't have any energy of like 50 Cent in the club, just no bravado towards it, no braggadociousness. It's just pure kind of somber and just kind of moodiness. And that's why I feel like it's an emo pop song, but it is catchy. It has a brilliant hook, real great singing from both singers on here. It's too bad that Mike Shinoda couldn't have been on the song also, but I just look after it. It's a pretty effectual song to see the direction that they would have went. It just works as a great single. You can hear it on the radio. It's a blue collar song. You can hear it before going to work or getting home. And it works in a nightclub sense also. It's just very moody. I just would think if you're not in the mood that Chester is in on this song, it'll lose some of its effects. But the second single is Talking to Myself, and this one has a little bit more charm and is not quite as brooding and as morbid as like Heavy was in some of these other songs. I do like this one. This is another one that I feel like is perfect for like a night venue type stuff, just somewhere stepping out. I mean, it's not a club song, not a dance song, not something that you're going to get up and shake your ass to, but it definitely has that kind of feeling of just like an exuberant lifestyle, just in terms of places where you go out and you step out and you're going to hear some kind of music and stuff. I just feel like it's a great kind of outgoing song. And Chester, once again, does a great job on here. I mean, he really was at like a complete tonal pitch on this project. I just would have to say he really had some good moments for his melodies and singing that he did on here. And like once again, it's just I do feel like the energy is just like extra kind of emo this time around. I don't mean to say extra emo like that's a bad thing, but it's just extra moody. And like I could listen to this one if I'm not in a bad mood more so than Heavy, but it's still kind of like, hey, you're kind of pissed off, that kind of, just people can notice that Chester probably wasn't in the best place as according to that. So I think that's kind of the thing. The third single was One More Light, and I didn't really like this single. I felt like this is kind of like the real kind of where this it starts to be pitched towards how the depression is kind of full force, full frontal. I wasn't vibing with this song. It didn't come off as like I mean, this one just kind of feels like a song that you wouldn't listen to on the way out. It's kind of more personal and a lot more kind of just, I don't know. I couldn't really think of the areas as to where to listen to it, but I didn't like the pitch of the song, and there wasn't very much things to like about it. I think it was just purely more focused on the mood as to like saying I'm not in the right place, and just kind of some regular bloodletting that's typical of Linkin Park, but it just really comes to an extreme on some of these songs. But that was simply one I didn't enjoy, and so I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about the 5 songs out of 10 that I recommend. So I liked half the project. So here are the 5 songs I recommend to you. So they are Nobody Can Save Me, Talking to Myself, Sorry for Now, Heavy, and Good Goodbye. Good Goodbye is the only song that has like guests on here apart from Kiera, who's on Heavy. But Pusha T and Stormzy are on Good Goodbye, and they needed more songs like this. This is like the last real burst of Linkin Park from the year 2000 and 2003. This is the classic archetype and architecture of a Linkin Park song. Mike Shinoda on the verses, Chester Bennington on the hook. But only this time there's not 3 Mike Shinoda verses. There's just Pusha T and Stormzy on there. But it's a pretty fitting type song for them. I do wish there had been way more songs like this. It's just kind of, there should have been 12 songs on here. I think they definitely could have added a couple other ones. But it's just very short and sweet. This has like a nice or a relatively brief tangent and then just fades. That's kind of the situation. But I did like Good Goodbye. And So sorry for now. There are a couple songs on here where Shinoda does some of the singing, or he kind of pulls off the sing-songy kind of vibe like Chester usually always does for Linkin Park, and he has some good effects. I feel like his singing reaches like a real particular highlight point on Sorry for Now. That's a really good one. I feel like this is another one that's pretty nice for like stepping out a bit and kind of going about. I mean, it keeps the mood as the rest of the album. That's this kind of more in like a depressed and kind of blue sounding album, but it does work because I can tell that Mike Shinoda is not nearly as depressed as like Chester Bennington is. So it just kind of feels more like Mike Shinoda's bloodletting on this album. Just feels a lot more just like normal and kind of like, hey, I'm having a bad day, but I'll be fine a couple days from now kind of thing. But it's like I do appreciate. I definitely like the kind of peppy bop to the beat for Sorry for Now, but it just is an easygoing kind of one that's just typical of the old fashioned Linkin Park where they were going through their problems and their social problems that they had in the past. That's vintage Linkin Park, and it's a good song, definite good song from Mike Shinoda. And then Nobody Can Save Me is another one that kind of reminded me of like Talking to Myself. I feel like Talking to Myself and Nobody Can Save Me are pretty similar. Just kind of goes with, I mean, this one's a lot more mellow and somewhat of like a, I mean, all of these club songs that you hear from Linkin Park on this album are going to have that this depressed notch taken to the extreme, but just depending upon the mood as to what you listen to it, it is still fitting. But you just have to understand that if you're not in the same mood as some of these folks, it might lose its value. But it is a great stepping out song. It's another one that's great for the weekend, depending upon the pitch of how you feel. You just have to kind of gauge the energy, but it is a good song, and Chester's singing is great on there. And but some of the songs I didn't enjoy, like I said, this mood kind of takes precedence over like some of the quality of the album. Like I felt like I couldn't get into One More Light, the title track, didn't like Sharp Edges, Halfway Right, Battle Symphony, and Invisible. Now Invisible I would have, but it was kind of trying to be like this kind of progressive kind of power ballad in like a pop sense, and I wasn't really digging that. And Halfway Right was kind of like the same thing. That was Chester Bennington's version of like Invisible. They both kind of gave like some approaches to where they're trying to make like a depressed person, but the fact that you're going to fight it and kind of still try to throw a halfway smile on that type of stuff. And I mean, I get the concept. I just wonder why the theme of like depression was so ominous on this album. It just really takes center stage about the moodiness and like like just depression, for lack of a better word, the kind of funks that people get in. I mean, that's the central theme of this album. There's no songs for like other attitudes and other type stuff. It's Linkin Park just completely at an apex of um like the one thing is just as far as saying I'm not in the right headspace and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And that's just kind of the concept of the whole album is like that. At least like on Meteora and Hybrid Theory and even Minutes to Midnight, they did have some moments for jubilance. But I think the closest thing that kind of comes to like jubilant on this album where they're not in some sort of funk is just Good Goodbye. But even that song kind of deals with the same typical attitudes that Linkin Park kind of has. I mean, it just really kind of reaches a pitch, but a lot of these are just kind of, you know, suicide type ballads in a way that kind of just expresses the fact as far as just trying to say like it really has to do with funk. A lot of these other five songs are just really kind of power ballads and just, you know, suicide prevention type songs that kind of deal with a lot of overly hammy kind of attitude and just a lot of progressive and kind of like really almost sappy kind of. I mean, I normally wouldn't say that Linkin Park is sappy, but it just kind of is this time around. It's just a lot more sappy just because like I feel like the emphasis how they alluded to it rather than dedicate a whole album to it was just better because they weren't quite in such a morbid mood. But it just feels like this time around they're kind of becoming like part of the suicide prevention squad or something like that. And it's just kind of, I mean, they needed to kind of have some more different kind of topics rather than just failed relationships and overcoming funks. And it's just that's all that Linkin Park, those are the only cards that Linkin Park is kind of playing on this album. There's nothing else to really go for, and that's depressing just because Linkin Park has so much talent and they've had a couple diamond selling albums and they have been on the charts for, they were on the charts for almost 20 years. But it's just kind of the concept that them having tunnel vision really derails this album in a way. I mean, 5 out of 10. The score I'm gonna give this album is a 5 out of 10. just because I liked half. Maybe I'll give it a 5.5, but it's not going to get much more than that. I think a 5.5 out of 10 will do, just because it does have some moments. But the thing that really derails this project is it just does not have any room for something that doesn't have tunnel vision on their mantra and theme for this album, which it just the album title is One More Light, which kind of means the idea of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and seeing the fact that hope is going to live and that type of stuff. But I don't know, it's a little bit more extreme than I would have expected from them. This really felt like an exclamation mark sentiment this time, whereas just the album before that, The Hunting Party, they were not nearly as serious and quite as foreboding. That's this kind of thing. So this album gets a 5.5 out of 10. The social score, I'm gonna give like a 6 out of 10, because I was surprised that despite the fact that they were in such a funk, that they had so many moments that kind of indicated like wanting to step out. Like there are more than just the 5 songs I listed that can be played in a night sense, but it's just kind of, you have to look at it and yeah, you have to look at it and kind of say it's just the mood that kind of derails it. It's just, I mean, normally I would not say that because Linkin Park has always been moody, but it's just kind of, it's like you listen to this song in the club and people are thinking like, hey, you're not in a good headspace. It just, I mean, to go from like a song like MGK's My Ex's Best Friend to like a song like Heavy, and it's like, wow, where did that come from? You are really not feeling well, are you? That's just kind of the concept where you look at that. It just feels like anytime you hear Heavy in the club, it means that a sad moment's kind of going on or something. It's not like, oh, hey, I just won a football game or something like that. It just really these, like I said, these songs are pretty morbidly depressed, and it's beyond noticeable this time around. But I still want to give this album a 6 because there are songs for stepping out. It's just the mood that you would have to equate to this time around. But in terms of like the future, there's really not going to be any more. I mean, Mike Shinoda did drop an album in 2018, which he did a year after this, called Post Traumatic. But really, Mike Shinoda has been gone since 2018, and the future of Linkin Park is kind of uncertain, which is disappointing. But I mean, this is a great statement to make. It's just too bad that the mood kind of overcame, like, to some degree, the quality of the music.